Hi folks, you're with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about affirmative action and particularly, is it successful? Has it worked? Why do we need it? What are the objectives? How do we measure or define unequal social outcomes? Do we look at simply the outcome, or do we look at the causes or the input factors? So the way it's framed in the globalist controlled media, and remember the globalists are heavily invested in creating racial division or social division at all levels, racial division, gender division, and also lifestyle division such as LGBTQ issues and so on. This is the globalists are hugely invested in this, as it's essential for undermining and destroying what were once very high trust Western societies that the globalists are absolutely determined to break and crush. And these, of course, are the main go-tos for the globalists. So affirmative action is really linked to that, and it appeals to the sensibilities. And also, look at this inequality. Look at it's wrong. It's wrong. It's unjust. It's unjust. And we have to do something. And if you're against doing something, then you are a Nazi Hitler. So I was looking at a piece by a Western political party that's globalist controlled to the nth degree, and they were saying, "Well, look how much work has to be done to create an equal society. We are further away than ever from having an equal society, and that is so wrong. It is so wrong. Only Hitler would allow this, and we have to fight back against Hitler." So what are their measures? Well, they say, or they allege, I mean, I don't know what the proof is on this, and the little proof I've been able to find was very, very circumstantial, but they're claiming, in fact, I made just a few notes here, so I'll just refer to those now so I get the numbers about right. So now they're claiming here that super aggressive affirmative action is needed in order to create equality for black people. This is a black equality in white societies. They don't give a fuck about black people in Africa. They can starve to death by the million. Who cares? But when the blacks are moved into the white society, suddenly these rights become a huge issue. And this so-called just social outcomes. Now they're saying here that black people are 5 times more likely to be behind paying their electricity bills. Now they're citing that this is, what is the reason for this? Well, they're not even really going into the reasons. It's sort of it's asserted that it must be a racial issue. It must be evil fucking Nazis that are oppressing these blacks by racist policies, racism. Hitler, Nazis and racism were everywhere. Hitler is standing in each electricity generating plant, making sure that the bills go out to black people, and it's unjust and it's fucking racist Nazis. So now they're saying black people are 5 times more likely to be behind in the power bill, and thus are more likely to have their power bills cut off. Therefore, this is an example of racism. It's an unequal outcome because they're 5 times more likely than white people. So therefore, if the outcome is different, it must be racism. It can be nothing else. And because of this evil racism that's everywhere, we have to have aggressive affirmative action programs. And if they're already aggressive affirmative, then they have to be more aggressive, and then more aggressive again, more intrusive. But we have to solve this problem because the problem is racism. The problem is Hitler. So this is the assertion, of course. Now we'll come back to the causes here, but they go into other things like behind black people are about the same. 5, give or take, 5 times more likely to be behind in say rent or mortgage payments. Black people have a disproportionate amount of fines. And they're unable to pay other requirements like, say, registering their car or paying for a driver's license or those sorts of things. And they also have a disproportionate amount of fines for or traffic fines and other things like that. So they can't, but they're quite a way behind on those, and the least likely to pay them. And they're also unable to get credit, get loans, say get credit cards or loans to, I don't buy a car and other consumer goods. There's far more of them on credit watch lists and these sorts of things. So all put together, they say, this political party says, well, look, this is how terrible things are. Look how, we're a horrible, horrible racist society. Why? It's a horrible racist society. Look how blacks are being treated. I mean, this is the outcomes are not only not equal, but they're a long way from equal. And this just illustrates what an evil racist society it is, and just how evil and discriminatory and prejudicial laws are against black people. And we have to change this. We must change it. Outcomes must be equal. And if they're not equal, that just shows the evilness that's in our society that must be changed, must be expunged, and so on. Now, this, of course, is utter and total nonsense. They go into other things like black kids don't pass, exams as much, and they don't go to university as much, and so on. So, but let's sort of have a look at this. Now, they skirt around quite a few things. Firstly, because of globalization, because of the green energy things that's universally applied and equally applied across the white Western world, by the way, which shows again it's a globalist scam, and the power bills, the increase in the power bills. Say in Australia where there's a vast amount of natural gas and vast amount of cheap and accessible, good quality coal. So Australia has been blessed with the inputs for cheap energy on a proportion that you don't really see anywhere else in the world. On top of that, a very efficient mining sector for extraction. So good quality coal can be extracted very cheaply in Australia. In terms of per tonne of extraction of the good quality coal, probably cheaper than really anywhere else in the world, I think, or certainly amongst the cheapest in the world. So Australia should have the cheapest electricity in the world, yet Australia's got almost the most expensive electricity in the world because of the most crazy and insane green energy scams that are being forced on the consumers without their consent or agreement. So again, a globalist scam. So the energy bills have gone through the roof. Now everyone's struggling to pay them, but some people are making, do better at dealing with their change in energy situation. Now, just the changes that my wife and I have made here, we've instead of having the the heater on 8 hours a day, for example, 8 hours a day in winter, we cut it down to say 3 hours, like an hour and a half in the morning, hour and a half at night, that type of thing. And we do a better job of keeping certain curtains to let the sun in, or we put on just an extra layer of clothing if it gets cooler, things like that. So it's not hard to deal with. Is it nice to walk around in a t-shirt and shorts all day long in the middle of winter with the heater on? Of course it's nice to do that. We like doing it. But do we want to pay knowing that we're being screwed on a pointless bit of fucking bullshit propaganda, the globalist climate change scam? We're having to pay big bucks for energy, needlessly so. And so we don't like that. Why should we subsidize that crazy, insane schemes, that type of thing. So some minor inconvenience on our part, and we changed that. Now, I've noticed the attitude, though, from some other people who can't really afford it. Having the heater on all day makes me feel good, so I'll leave it on. And if I can't pay the bill, well, paying the bill, that's a problem for tomorrow or the next day. I don't want to think that far ahead. I can't think about the end of the day, let alone tomorrow. So these sort of attitudes. Now, this is an attitude very much in black communities, and the consequences of actions are something that why should I care? It makes me feel good to do this now. And I've hired and worked with black people, people who supposedly have 2 degrees or a degree and a master's, and they too have this attitude. So I think it's widely prevalent in that society, and not that it's unique in that society. I see other people, have it as well. But there's an example. There's a house for that's used by the immigration department, not that far away from where we live, and we just happen to know the people who live next door to that house, and they frequently put in supposed refugees and people like that, and they have no compunction about leaving the air conditioning, whether it be for heating or cooling, on 24/7, and they'll when the bill comes in, they'll wait till the electricity's cut off, and then they'll just disappear and go somewhere else. And this sort of thing seems to happen again and again. The concept of using something in moderation. So it's very much, I think, an attitude in community, or an attitude amongst the black community about, hey, I can't, I'm not going to think about tomorrow, and so I'll keep the air conditioning going full bore until it gets cut off. Now the rents and the mortgage payments are the same. Certainly there's an area not that far away from where we live that's sort of turned into a Pacific Islander sort of sub ghetto, I suppose, and that problem is the same there. Falling behind in rent, and well, they have mortgages there, but falling behind in the rent, and they lead lifestyles, eating out every day and all the time. They may eat out at every meal, and engage in a lifestyle that they simply can't afford, and but they enjoy it. They have a good time. They feel good. It makes them feel good. And so when the rent falls due, oh well, who cares? That, and so they have that. So it's very much an attitude of responsibility and thinking ahead and planning and so on. Now the fines, this is a knock-on effect here, where the registration on the car, for example, falls due, and they think, oh well, if I pay for that, I can't go out and have a good time this weekend. So why don't I go out and have a good time now, and then I can worry about paying the registering of the car. But I need the car to get to work, or go here or there, and so I got to drive the car, and even in case whether they could drive the car in a roundabout route to avoid likely detection and thus a fine for driving an unregistered vehicle, they still will drive in the most dangerous manner through the most dangerous area, because, well, why should I care about what those guys? I don't care, and they've got no right to tell me. Only my village elders can tell me what to do. So why should I give and if they do fine me and I can't pay the fine, then I become a victim, and therefore I benefit from that. And so there's a very perverse attitude to these sorts of things. So they don't pay the register, and then they get a heavy fine for that. Then they can't pay that fine, and so then they've got to go on sort of a payment plan. Then they're dragged into court for not paying it, assume the police can even find them, and on it goes. So you get the spiraling effect of their debts increase. Now, a lot of the things they buy, say under $100, they can buy on a payment plan. And to them, it's effectively free when they do that. But then all the bills start to come due, and then they can't pay those, or they pay them but they can't pay the rent, or they pay the car registration but can't buy food, and on it goes. So it becomes an interlocking system of a downward spiral. And this is really what's being reported here in this in a few pieces that I've noticed here. That the situation isn't that affirmative action can solve this. It's not even related to affirmative action. It's not even related to racism or inequality or anything of that. It's related to a group of people who have a very different attitude and a different type of behavior and sense of responsibility and sense of understanding of how how they have to behave if they're going to sort of get by. And again, I've employed black people, and I was sitting down having a more or less similar type of conversation with this black guy, a guy who had a degree and a master's, and I mean it's all affirmative action, but he was sort of telling me, well, why should I get a job that pays shit money, which means I have to really be very disciplined. I have to live a very simple, ordinary life. I can't do any of the things that I want to do. I can't do the things that I see on the movies. I see the local drug dealer gangster guy. He's driving a fantastic car. He's got a great car. He's got hot chicks that he's always dating, and he lives in a fancy house, and he's always got money to go to the nicest nightclubs and drink the most expensive cocktail. Well, that's how I want to live. Why should I live a simple life of someone who works at the local retail store? I want better than that. But I want it now. I don't want to have to work for it and get it, in a year's time. I don't have to spend, I want that now. And that was his attitude, and his view to the affirmative action degree or college. He said, well, they sent me to college. I didn't really have to turn up. I didn't kind of have to do anything. I could goof off and do what I wanted. They kind of covered all the cost for it, so I had no debt. And he was of the realistic view that even if he never bothered to turn up, they still would have given him the degree and still would have given him the master's. And the guy was close to illiterate in spite of his so-called higher education. So his views, I only did that because they made it so easy for me. But if I'd had to try or had to be disciplined about it, I wouldn't have done it, was his view. Wouldn't have gone to higher education. So we're talking about behavioural and attitudinal differences. So if you want to fix the problem, you would have to fix the behaviour and the attitudinal problems. But instead of doing that or coming to grips with that, the globalists, very duplicitously, by the way, the globalists use this as saying, well, that's how bad your society is, white people. That's evil you are, you white people. Look at this difference in outcomes. You're guilty, you're ashamed, you should be ashamed. You should get down on your knees and grovel for forgiveness. Grovel for forgiveness, because look at these unequal outcomes. Because those unequal outcomes, they mean that you're all a racist bunch of fucking Nazi Hitlers. And we have to change society whole. We have to take every bit of power white people have, take it away, because look what you're doing with that power. Look at these unequal outcomes, you evil motherfucking Nazis. So this is really the narrative that they spin and the narrative that they push. So it's got nothing to do with equal, and nothing to do with more affirmative action will fix it. More free passes, more dispensations. Already, black people being given, free passes through to finish junior high school, free passes to senior high school, free passes to college, and so on and so forth. They don't have to meet the standards that white people have to meet. There's a huge push across the Western world now to say, well, look, black people are being arrested at a higher rate than white people. That's got to be racism. It can't be anything else. They know it's not, but it's just too useful. It is so useful to the globalist project to have this constant blame, shame game pushed on white people, that any difference in outcome is due to racism and evil white people being prejudiced and racist towards black people or indeed other minorities. Is it because of their behaviour that is makes their positive or well-off life outcome? Their life outcomes are down to their behaviour. Sure, there are individual cases of, unfortunately, somebody is involved maybe in a motor vehicle accident. It's not their fault and they're injured, and these sort of things. These things can happen, of course, but generally it's got nothing to do with affirmative action or needing more affirmative action or anything to do with racism. This inequality of outcomes is used all the time across the Western world, again funded and pushed and put forward by the globalists and their media goons to suggest that something terrible is going on that must be corrected. But it's not that. the difference in behaviour is that so either the behaviour has to be corrected, or alternatively, the decisions taken that the two societies, for the most, can't live together. I think if you took out the people that have a climate, because remember in North America, for example, the black people have been there for varying numbers, but for 300 plus years, and the Civil War finished in 1865. So 160, 170 years or something of non-slavery, and there were also many blacks in America that were already freed slaves by 1865 or before 1865. But the number of black people that have integrated into white, what you'd say would be a middle class sort of white behaviour and white society is still quite low. So why is that after all that time? It's not like they arrived off a boat yesterday or something. And you see the same thing in Australia and around the rest of the world. You see it in Britain, you see it in Canada. It doesn't really matter where you go. You see the same thing. So the correcting the behaviour or realising that two races, in a large part, you can't really coexist together, or not successfully. And the non-success, that is the misbehaviour of one, or the inappropriate or unhelpful behaviour of one group, is ruthlessly exploited by the globalists to, in effect, oppress the white people and brutalise them. And thus we should push back strongly against that. You've been a Tacitus today at your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.